The conference room door swung open, and I watched Victor Rourke freeze mid-step. His confident smile collapsed like a house of cards. For 16 months, I'd imagined this moment, but nothing prepared me for the actual shock rippling across his face. He stood in the doorway of Northline Freight's downtown office, résumé clutched in his hand, staring at me sitting behind the hiring desk. The same Victor Rourke who'd fired me, who'd told the entire company I'd never find better work, who'd publicly humiliated me at every opportunity. Now he needed a job. From me. I straightened my portfolio and gestured to the empty chair across from me. "Please, have a seat, Mr. Rourke." My voice stayed steady, professional. "Let's begin with your last role and why you left." His face went pale. The other panelists exchanged glances. This interview was going to be interesting. 16 months earlier, I'd stood in Rourke and Wayland Logistics' main conference room during an all-hands meeting. Victor paced the front like he owned the world, which technically he did as CEO. He'd been discussing quarterly targets when someone asked about my route optimization project. "Lee Parker?" Victor laughed, that cruel sound I'd grown to hate. "She'll never find better work than what she has here. Some people are simply meant to stay in their lane." The room went silent. My face burned as 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me. My hands shook in my lap, but I kept my expression neutral. That night, sitting alone in my apartment, I made a decision. I opened a notes app on my phone and typed 3 words, "Document everything now." I didn't know how yet, but somehow, someday, the truth would matter. The documentation started immediately. Every email Victor sent with impossible deadlines, I saved. Every meeting where he moved goalposts, I recorded in timestamped notes. My KPI dashboard showed I'd hit 92% of my targets, yet Victor kept calling my performance unreachable. When I compiled everything into a neat folder and brought it to HR, the response crushed me. "Performance reviews are subjective leadership decisions," the HR director explained, barely looking at my evidence. "We trust our executives to make those calls." I walked out of that office feeling defeated, but a vendor stopped me in the hallway. Marcus, who'd worked with our company for years, pulled me aside. "Victor's cutting corners on the Mason Street contract," he whispered. "Safety inspections, maintenance schedules. Someone should know." I added that information to my growing file. 2 weeks later, Victor dumped an impossible project on my desk. The route optimization pilot had been failing for 6 months under his direct oversight. Now it was mine to fix, with a 2-month deadline and 0 additional resources. "Fix it or it proves my point about you," he said, smirking. I knew it was a setup. Instead of complaining, I worked. I negotiated weekend truck slots with our drivers, created a rotation system that eliminated overtime, and redesigned the dispatch schedule from scratch. Costs dropped 11% in the first month. The system worked beautifully. I documented every decision, every calculation, every result. When I presented the final report to the executive team, Victor listened with his arms crossed. 3 days later, a board memo went out praising innovative leadership from our executive team in solving the routing crisis. My name appeared nowhere. Victor's appeared everywhere. The breaking point came at another town hall meeting. A junior analyst asked Victor about employee retention, specifically why experienced staff kept leaving. Victor's response made my blood boil. "Good people don't whine about their situations," he said, leaning casually against the podium. "They either adapt or they leave. Honestly, if someone's unhappy here, they probably weren't the right fit anyway." What Victor didn't know was that Bradley, a junior in IT, was recording the session for the company newsletter. That recording somehow found its way to several staff members' personal devices. By the next morning, it had reached a niche industry newsletter called Logistics Watch. The quote spread quietly through professional circles. 2 days later, Victor announced a company-wide loyalty review, threatening anyone who'd leaked internal discussions. I kept my head down and my files updated. My annual performance review arrived a week later, and it was a massacre. After hitting 92% of my targets and delivering a project that saved the company hundreds of thousands, I was suddenly rated below expectations. The review cited cultural fit concerns and leadership alignment issues. HR offered me a severance package, small but immediate, if I signed that afternoon. Take the day to think about it, they said, sliding papers across the desk. I refused to sign. I'd like written documentation of specific performance failures, I said calmly. With examples and dates. HR looked uncomfortable. They promised to get back to me. Instead, Victor called me into his office the next morning. You're terminated for cause, effective immediately, he said, barely looking up from his computer. Security will escort you out. Good luck finding better, Lee. You're going to need it. The first week after being fired, I let myself feel everything. Anger, humiliation, fear about my future. Then I got strategic. I updated my resume, yes, but more importantly, I organized my documentation into a professional portfolio. Every project, every metric, every success I'd achieved at Rourke and Wayland went into a clean presentation. I reached out to 3 clients I'd worked with directly, asking for written statements about my performance. 2 responded within days with glowing letters. The third, the owner of Mason Freight Services, wrote something unexpected. Lee consistently delivered results despite challenging internal obstacles. I should note that several safety concerns I raised about maintenance schedules were dismissed by R&W leadership, which ultimately led to our contract termination. I added that letter to a separate folder labeled Reference Materials. A recruiter named Angela reached out through my network. I've got a growing company that needs someone who actually knows logistics, not just theory, she said during our phone call. Northline Freight. They're clean, they're growing, and they value operations experience. Interested? I researched Northline thoroughly. They had a reputation for ethical practices, transparent operations, and treating drivers well. The position was operations lead, 1 level below director, but I didn't care about titles anymore. I wanted to work somewhere real. The interview included a complex case study about dock efficiency. I solved it using methods similar to what I'd developed at Rourke and Wayland, presenting my work calmly without bragging or mentioning my former employer. At the end, Northline's COO, Patricia Summers, asked one question: "Is there anything we should know about your last firm?" I paused, then said, "Only that I learned what good operations should look like by seeing what they shouldn't be." My first month at Northline, I kept my head down and learned their systems. No grand gestures, no immediate overhauls. I listened to dock supervisors, rode with drivers, and studied their existing processes. Then I proposed something small, a dock-to-dispatch handoff checklist. Simple paperwork that ensured nothing got lost between loading and delivery assignment. The team was skeptical but willing to try. 2 weeks later, delay claims dropped 18%. Drivers reported feeling more confident about their loads. Dispatchers spent less time on phone calls fixing problems. Patricia called me into her office, smiling. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it," she said. "We've had 3 clients specifically mention improved reliability this month." That same week, I got an unexpected call. Marcus, the vendor from Rourke and Wayland, asked if Northline was taking new contracts. "Because I'm thinking of making a change," he said carefully. Marcus met me for coffee at a neutral location. He brought copies of emails showing Victor's systematic neglect of maintenance schedules to cut costs. Trucks running past inspection dates, drivers logging excessive hours, safety reports filed late or not at all. "I can't work with R&W anymore," Marcus explained. "My insurance won't cover it, and frankly, it's not ethical." Would Northline be interested in my contract? I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I took the email straight to Northline's legal and compliance departments, explaining the situation fully. "This vendor wants to work with us," I said. "But I need to do this correctly. No poaching violations, no questionable tactics. Can we compete for this contract cleanly?" Patricia appreciated my caution. We'll send a formal proposal, she decided. If he chooses us based on merit, that's legitimate competition. Make sure we document everything properly. I decided to do something bold but completely transparent. I organized a lunch and learn session at a local industry association, open to anyone in logistics. The topic was efficiency through simplification, making operations work for drivers. I promoted it through normal professional channels. No secrets, no backdoor recruiting, just sharing knowledge. 23 people attended, including 2 mid-level managers from Rourke and Wayland. They came on their own time, paid their own way, and asked genuine questions about process improvement. I never mentioned my former employer. I talked about checklists, communication systems, and treating drivers as partners rather than resources. The session was recorded and posted publicly. A week later, I received a cease and desist letter from Rourke and Wayland's legal team, accusing me of recruiting employees through deceptive means. The letter was full of legal-sounding threats but light on actual violations. I forwarded it to Patricia with a note, "For your information." All activities were public and documented. Northline's legal counsel, Thomas Bradford, was everything I hoped for: thorough, calm, and unimpressed by bullying tactics. He spent 2 days reviewing every aspect of my lunch and learn, then drafted a response that dismantled Victor's claims point by point. Public professional development event, properly announced, no employment discussions, no confidential information shared, Thomas wrote in his formal response. Your claims have no legal merit. Further harassment will be documented. He sent me a copy with a note, "You did everything right. Don't let them intimidate you." I stayed completely silent publicly, refusing to engage in any industry gossip about the situation. But privately, I learned something interesting. The Regional Safety Board had scheduled a routine audit of Rourke and Wayland's operations. Routine audits happened regularly in our industry, but the timing was notable. Apparently, several anonymous tips had raised concerns worth investigating. The audit findings became semi-public through industry channels within weeks. Maintenance gaps, falsified inspection timestamps, pressure from leadership to cut corners on safety protocols. The violations weren't catastrophic enough for criminal charges, but they triggered regulatory flags and mandatory compliance reviews. Rourke and Wayland's board called an emergency meeting. 2 of their largest clients, concerned about liability and reputation, announced they were opening new requests for proposals. Both invited Northline to bid. Patricia called me into her office looking energized but cautious. "These are significant opportunities," she said. "But I need to know you can handle this professionally. Your former employer will be competing for the same contracts. Can you lead our response without this becoming personal?" I met her eyes directly. "I can do this completely by the book," I promised. "Better proposals, better service, better ethics. Let our work speak for itself." I spent 3 weeks building Northline's RFP responses. Every detail mattered. I created transparent service level agreements, phased onboarding plans that wouldn't disrupt the client's current operations, and included a driver wellness clause that guaranteed rest periods and maintenance standards. The proposals were boring in the best way, clear, professional, and focused entirely on delivering reliable service. I never mentioned Rourke and Wayland by name. I never highlighted their problems. I simply presented what Northline could do, backed by data from our recent performance improvements. Patricia reviewed my work and nodded approvingly. "This reads like a company people can trust," she said. Then she added something that made my heart race: "Both clients want live presentations. We're scheduled for the same week as Rourke and Wayland's pitches. You'll be presenting for Northline. Are you ready?" I took a deep breath. Yes. I'm ready. The presentation room was formal but not intimidating. I'd practiced my pitch dozens of times, but instead of relying on slides, I did something unusual. After walking through our proposed systems, I handed the client team a randomized list of Northline driver contact numbers. "Don't take my word for how we operate," I said calmly. "Call any driver on this list right now. Ask them about their schedules, maintenance standards, and whether management actually listens to their concerns. The clients looked surprised but intrigued. They stepped out and made calls. 15 minutes later, they returned looking impressed. Your driver said exactly what you did, the procurement director noted. That level of consistency is rare. I smiled. That's because it's real, not just a pitch. Then I learned something interesting. Rourke and Whalen's scheduled presentation was the next day, but their presenter had cancelled last minute. Rumors suggested internal leadership transitions. Northline won one major contract immediately. The second client asked for additional meetings, wanting to understand our scaling capacity. It wasn't a complete victory, but it represented serious momentum. The industry noticed. Logistics Watch published a brief article about Northline's growth and transparent operations culture. My name appeared in the piece as operations lead. That evening, I received an unexpected call from Janet Reeves, a former HR partner from Rourke and Wayland who I'd always respected. I shouldn't tell you this, Janet said quietly. But Victor's out. The board forced him to resign after the audit findings. He's getting minimal severance because several violations happened under his direct oversight. I sat in silence, processing the information. I'd imagined this moment countless times, but actually hearing it felt surreal. How's the rest of the staff? I asked. Scared, Janet admitted. But maybe that's necessary for change. The industry news trickled out carefully over the next 2 weeks. Victor had resigned to pursue other opportunities, according to Rourke and Whalen's official statement. But people who understood corporate language knew what that meant. Logistics Watch published a follow-up piece connecting the resignation to the safety audit findings, though they kept the details vague to avoid legal issues. I watched it all unfold from a distance, focusing on my work at Northline. We won the second contract after demonstrating our scaling plan. My team celebrated with pizza in the break room, happy about growth but not gloating about where the contracts came from. Then Patricia called me into her office with interesting news. We're opening a senior operations manager position, she said. It's a significant step up, overseeing regional operations. I'd like you to be part of the interview panel. I agreed, curious about who we'd attract. I had no idea what was coming. The recruiting team shared the shortlist for senior operations manager with me and 2 other panelists. 5 strong candidates, each with impressive backgrounds. But one name was marked pending sensitivity review. I assumed it was a background check issue and didn't think much about it. Then Patricia called me privately. Lee, I need to tell you something before you see the full file, she said carefully. One of the applicants is Victor Rourke. My stomach dropped. He applied here? To Northline? His application came through normal channels. Legally, we have to consider him fairly. Patricia watched my face carefully. But I need to know, can you sit on this interview panel professionally? If not, I completely understand, and we'll restructure the team. I thought about it for a long moment. This was everything I'd never dared to imagine. I can do this, I finally said. But I'll need the night to prepare myself properly. That night, I barely slept. Not from anxiety or fear, but from the sheer weight of responsibility. This wasn't about revenge. This was about doing the right thing, the professional thing, even when facing someone who'd treated me terribly. I reviewed Northline's evaluation criteria carefully: leadership experience, cultural fit, operational knowledge, and safety track record. I wrote out questions focused entirely on those areas, avoiding anything personal. Around midnight, a reference check email appeared in my inbox. It was from Marcus, the vendor, responding to Northline's background inquiry about Victor. His assessment was diplomatic but clear. Competent strategically, but struggled with operational details and staff retention. Safety culture was not a priority. I printed it and added it to my interview materials. Tomorrow would define not who Victor was, but who I'd become after everything he put me through. Victor walked into the conference room at exactly 10 o'clock, the scheduled interview time. He saw me sitting at the panel table, and his face went through shock, anger, and finally forced neutrality in about 3 seconds. I gestured to the chair across from us, my voice steady and professional. "Good morning, Mr. Rourke. Please have a seat. I'm Lee Parker, Operations Lead. This is Patricia Summers, our COO, and Thomas Bradford, our General Counsel." Victor sat stiffly. I opened my notepad and began with a standard question, but one I knew he'd struggle with. "Tell us about your experience with owner-operator retention. What strategies have you found most effective?" He launched into corporate buzzwords about engagement initiatives and competitive compensation structures. I let him talk, then asked for specifics. "Can you give us a concrete example of a retention problem you solved?" He fumbled, switching to vague industry trends. Patricia and Thomas exchanged quick glances. I pulled up a printed article on my tablet, the Logistics Watch piece about his town hall quote. "There's a documented statement where you said employees who complain should simply leave. Can you elaborate on your philosophy about workplace culture and respect?" Victor's jaw tightened. "That quote lacks context," he said defensively. "It was about maintaining high standards and not tolerating negativity." Thomas leaned forward. "How do you distinguish between negativity and legitimate concerns about safety or operations?" Victor struggled through an answer about judgment calls and trusting leadership instinct. The more he talked, the clearer the pattern became: deflection, ego, and zero accountability. Finally, Patricia offered something unexpected. "Mr. Rourke, do you have any questions for us? Perhaps about company culture or operations philosophy?" Victor looked directly at me, and I saw the old arrogance flicker across his face. "Yes, actually," he said with a thin smile. "I'm curious how someone at Lee's experience level jumped to decision-maker so quickly." The question hung in the air like poison. Patricia and Thomas both tensed, recognizing the inappropriate nature of the question. But I'd prepared for something like this. I smiled calmly and met Victor's eyes without flinching. "I advanced by doing work I was told was impossible and having documentation to prove it," I said evenly. "I focused on results, ethics, and building systems that actually work for everyone involved. Turns out, when you prioritize operational excellence over ego, companies notice." The room went silent. Victor's face reddened slightly, but he couldn't respond without making things worse. Patricia cleared her throat. "I think we have what we need. Thank you for your time, Mr. Rourke. We'll be in touch within 2 days with our decision." Victor left quickly, not making eye contact with anyone. After the door closed, Thomas let out a long breath. "That was professionally handled, Lee." "Remarkably so." Patricia agreed. "Let's reconvene in an hour for deliberations." The deliberation room was small and quiet. Patricia opened a folder with evaluation notes. "Let's go through this systematically," she said. "Lee, you worked with him directly. I need your honest, professional assessment." I took a breath and presented my analysis factually. Skill gaps in operational details. Track record of poor safety culture, confirmed by reference checks and regulatory findings. History of staff retention problems. Communication style that undermines team morale. I pulled out Marcus's reference email and the Logistics Watch articles, all public information. Most concerning is the pattern of deflecting accountability and treating operational problems as cultural issues rather than systemic ones. Thomas nodded. The inappropriate question at the end demonstrated poor judgment and possible bias issues. Patricia looked at both of us. "I'm not seeing anything that suggests he'd be a cultural fit here or that he's learned from recent challenges." The vote was unanimous, no hire. Patricia turned to me. "Lee, would you draft the rejection email? Keep it professional and clear." I spent 30 minutes crafting that email, possibly the most important professional correspondence of my life. Every word mattered. "Dear Mr. Rourke, thank you for your interest in the Senior Operations Manager position at Northline Freight. After careful consideration, We have decided to pursue other candidates whose experience and approach better align with our operational needs and company culture. We appreciate your time and wish you success in your future endeavors. Best regards, Northline Freight Hiring Team. I showed it to Patricia and Thomas. Both approved. I hit send, feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This wasn't the vengeful victory I'd once imagined. It was simply the right decision, made for the right reasons. 20 minutes later, my email pinged with a response from Victor's personal account. "Could we talk off the record?" the message read. I stared at it for a long moment, then showed Patricia. "Your call," she said. "But if you meet him, do it in public space." I agreed to meet Victor in Northline's glass-walled lobby, visible to everyone but private enough for conversation. He arrived looking tired, defeated in a way I'd never seen. We sat in modern chairs designed for brief meetings. "I'm not here to argue the decision," Victor said quietly. "I just wanted to ask your advice. How do I come back from this? I could have been cruel. Part of me wanted to be. But I thought about the person I wanted to be, not the person his treatment had almost made me." "3 things," I said calmly. "First, own your decisions. Stop blaming context or other people when things go wrong. Second, fix your approach to safety and operations. Those aren't just checkboxes, they're how you protect people. Third, respect everyone, especially the people doing the actual work. They know things you don't." Victor nodded slowly, absorbing the words. "I should have listened to you," he admitted. "About a lot of things." I stood up as my phone buzzed with a message from Patricia. The second RFP client had signed. "I need to get back to work," I said, extending my hand professionally. Victor shook it, and I walked away without looking back. I returned to my team carrying the new contract folder. "Back to work," I said simply. The office broke into applause, not because I'd humiliated anyone, but because we'd built something real through hard work and integrity. That evening, I updated my notes app one final time. Instead of documenting injustice, I wrote, "Proved worth through work. Build trust through consistency. Won by being better, not bitter." I closed my laptop and smiled. Some victories take time, but they're worth the wait.